For the first time since 2016, NHL players will be participating in a best on best international hockey tournament. And on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, a full throated Four Nations face off preview.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's show, I've been so excited for this since it was announced. A full Four Nations face-off preview. So the show is broken up into our normal three segments. We'll talk a little bit about the big picture, aside from the hockey, why this is so important from a marketing perspective, why the players themselves care so much about this, why this is such a great opportunity for the NHL. And of course, we're going to talk about the teams themselves, composition, the experience, the various experience of the given teams, who's accomplished what, all of that good stuff. And let me just start by saying, as somebody who loves sports at large, this week I'll be in Florida for the Daytona 500. I've gone to dozens of NHL playoff games, NBA playoff games, baseball playoff games. There is nothing that kind of gives the feeling that international best on best hockey gives me. It's been a long time since NHL players have gotten to participate in the Olympics. We're going on 10 years. This Saturday actually is the 10-year anniversary of the TJ Oshie shootout game against the Russians in the Sochi Olympics. It's been that long. We're going on 10 years. And you'll notice when we talk about the rosters in our third segment, there are only two players on Team Canada there are only two players in this whole Four Nations face-off that have Olympic gold medals, and they're Sidney Crosby and they're Drew Doughty. And that's it. Brad Marchand was not on that 2014 Olympic team. And then pretty much everyone else on every other roster has debuted post 2014. Now, if you want to get into the merits of discussing World Cup of Hockey medals, you could put some more guys into that conversation as well. But this is a precursor to next year's Winter Olympics in Milan, Italy. And the players themselves have been adamant that this is something they are very passionate about representing their country in the Olympics, having the opportunity to do so. And we've missed out on a lot of moments. It's crazy that it's taken this long for McDavid, McKinnon, and Sidney Crosby to all be on the same Canadian team. If you'll recall, last time we did a best on best tournament, there was Team North America. The McDavid jersey's right there over my right shoulder from that tournament where he was on Team North America, which was the best American and Canadian players under the age of 22 going into that season. And I understand why the guys care about this. For some of these guys, this might be their best shot at winning something on a team. There are guys in this tournament who have never played in a playoff game before on all four teams. There are guys like Brady Tkachuk, who is an extremely decorated individual talent. He's never played in a playoff game as an Ottawa Senator. You look at some of the really gifted players on Sweden, on Finland, and even on Team Canada who just don't have the facilities around them. They don't have the organizational infrastructure for team success. And on an individual level, getting chosen to represent your country, it means something. And it represents for people from Canada, for people from Sweden, Finland, even and down here in the States, there is a matter of that national pride of getting to throw your country's flag on, whether it's after a game and someone hands you a flag to drape over your shoulders, of just having your country on your chest. There's something innate about that brings something out of you, that it's a very prideful and empowering feeling that you're one of the chosen that get to represent your country. And this tournament is not the Olympics. Let's be clear about that. We all understand that we would like more teams to be able to participate. We would have liked to have seen the Czech Republic. We would have liked to have seen Switzerland. We would have liked to have seen Germany. Ideally, you would like Russia to participate, But being the state of the world, the geopolitics, what they are, we all need to understand that if the NHL were to allow a Team Russia to participate, even in this, not talking about the Olympics, because this is not an IIHF sanctioned event. This is something else. If this were the Olympics, if you were allowed, or if you allowed Russia to participate, most of those European federations would not participate. They would protest the invitation of Russia. So you have to choose. Do you want Canada, Russia, and the US? Or do you want Canada, the US, Sweden, Finland, and those other federations that we just mentioned? So I understand it's hard for some people to say a tournament that doesn't feature Nikita Kucherov can't be called a best on best tournament because he is one of the best players in the world. And there's no disputing that. But this is not a geopolitical podcast. This is a hockey podcast. But it is important that people do understand that there is some behind the scenes stuff to consider here. I would love if Russia were able to participate. You know, they have the best three goalie room on the planet, if we're talking about it purely in terms of talent, with Bobrovsky, Shesterkin, and Sorokin. That's tremendous. But I am genuinely excited about this. And one last thing in this first segment before we take our first break. This represents a golden opportunity for the NHL to kind of strike iron while it's hot. This is a week that's light in the sports world. The NBA is playing this week. Their all-star activities are this weekend. But viewership for the NBA all-star stuff has been going down consistently over the last handful of years. The all-star game itself, which is played on Sunday of this upcoming weekend, the all-star Saturday night, where no star players want to participate in the dunk contest. Occasionally, you'll still get good players in the three-point shootout. Last year, they featured a segment where it was Steph Curry versus Sabrina Ionescu of the WNBA, who had a really good season for the Liberty, who went on to win the WNBA title. But I am very excited at the proposition of USA Canada being played on national television in both countries, on network television, meaning one of the stations that people get over the air. There's a reason down here in the States the NFL the bulk of the NFL schedule is on Fox, CBS, and NBC, so people can watch it. It is easily accessible. You don't need a special cable package. And I understand that ESPN, that TNT are pretty standard as far as cable packages go, that you don't have to have a fancy bells and whistles sports package like you do need in some cases to get certain channels like NHL Network or Fox Sports 1. But to get this game in the environment we're in right now, where it's going to be Team USA versus Team Canada in the Bell Center on a Saturday night with a light sports schedule opposite around them, this is a golden opportunity to get an extremely high quality hockey game in front of a very casual audience. And it is imperative that hockey starts to make inroads in trying to grow that casual audience, because that's the lifeblood of a sport. As much as you need your diehards to be the foundation, without that middle, without that bridge to the casual fan who checks in, or if they're flicking the channels, they'll stay on it out of curiosity, your sport's in trouble. And we are seeing that phenomena happen across sports. It's not just hockey that is having viewership change. You know, baseball has largely become a regional sport. Basketball, after almost a decade of basically unlimited growth, basketball is kind of in a weird place as well, where their viewership is kind of trending in a troubling direction. So this is a golden opportunity. We are going to take our first break of today's episode. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the meaningfulness, the significance, and then we'll talk about the rosters and frankly why I'm so excited right after this. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every single week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyles. Whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto, plus Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks that keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. You guys know me. I am very serious about my fitness, run, lift, and really manage my macros Protein plus meals from Factor help keep things simple, and the convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/lockedonnhl 50 off and use code lockedonnhl 50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code lockedonnhl E50 off at factormeals.com/lockedonnhl 50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Thank you to everyone who's hanging out on this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we're talking about the Four Nations face-off. Why I'm so excited. And I just wanted to finish my thought as far as, the non-hockey side of this, because ultimately these midseason events, all-star games, or in this case, the Four Nations face-off, they're meant to be a showcase for the league to get the league's most interesting and best players in front of a wider audience, because most people, they're not engaging with the sport beyond their favorite team. I consider myself a relatively casual NBA fan. I'll watch the Knicks on nights the Rangers and the Oilers aren't playing, but I'm not going out of my way to, watch the Celtics play the Nuggets. As good a matchup as that is on paper, if I have the choice of watching a hockey game versus that, I'm going to pick the hockey game. But at the All-Star game, you get to watch Nikola Jokic. You get to watch Jason Tatum. And it's the same thing here in the hockey world. For people who are only watching, their favorite team, you're only going to see Connor McDavid at most 4 times in a season if you're a fan of a Pacific Division team. If you're an Eastern Conference team, you get to see Connor McDavid play maybe 2 times a year if you're not going out of your way to watch Oiler games. And these types of showcases are a byproduct of a world that's very different from the one we live in now. Back in the day, most people only saw these guys play in all-star games because that was one guaranteed way to get your players in front of people. The casual audience, the casual sports fan, they wanted to see back in the day, they wanted to see Bill Russell play in a basketball game. And there was not the ease of access there is to watch every game now. As much as the NHL has to iron things out down here in the States and up in Canada as far as viewership, I know Sportsnet streaming service for their out-of-market games has issues all the time. As far as blackouts down here in the States, it's the same deal on ESPN+. The ESPN Plus system we have down here is better than what NHL TV used to be, because NHL TV was a lot more cost prohibitive and it was its own thing. Whereas down here now, if you have an ESPN Plus, which is on its own like $12 a month, or if you bundle it with Hulu and Disney Plus, you get it for like $33, $34 a month. You get all the out-of-market games. So whatever games you can't get on cable in your area are on there. Where I live, I can't watch Rangers, Devils, or Islander games on there, but I can watch the other 29 teams as long as they're not playing one of those 3 teams. And it's made it a lot easier for me to keep tabs on teams I'm curious about and more interested in. So that's why we still have these. The All-Star game and Four Nations are a means of rewarding certain markets. You put these on a rotation, send them to different places as a means of highlighting different cities. In this case, we're highlighting Montreal and Boston, 2 cornerstone organizations in the sport that date back more than 100 years to that original 6 era, and 2 power broker families and the Molsons and the Jacobs. It took me a minute to remember who the Bruins owners were, but this is a means of rewarding those organizations and those ownership groups. Ideally, you would like to do more of this. My elevator pitch, and something I've always wanted to see the NHL do to kind of capture that energy of what it's like to play hockey, where you get to the rink at 8 a.m. and you have to play 2 games that day. And of course, we're never going to ask NHL players to play 2 games in a given day. We can play 2 games in the same building on a given day. We can have a double header. We see Boston do that with the Beanpot tournament, which is a college hockey tournament where Northeastern, Harvard, Boston College and Boston University. You have to forgive me. I'm not a Boston person. It took me a minute to recall that. Where those guys all play a round robin tournament in the same building over the course of a few days. I have always said it'd be really cool to do that in Toronto or in Montreal or in the greater New York area where you have the access to several world-class hockey facilities where you could play at the Prudential Center, UBS, and Madison Square Garden all in the same day. They're all separated by less than 30 some odd miles. And yeah, you'd have to work out the logistics and police escorts and all that. But that's kind of my pipe dream for this type of Four Nations or international tournament of getting all these games played in a short period of time in the same city to highlight a city that has the infrastructure to support that many games within a given week. Okay. The last big picture thing I want to talk about, and we'll talk about the rosters in the final segment. This means something. Fundamentally, when you are talking about the culture and the significance of your sport, highlighting your best players is essential. And the NHL has the unique opportunity here to kind of bridge generations because we haven't totally closed the door on that Sidney Crosby Ovechkin era, and Sid and Ovi carrying the NHL out of a lockout abyss for 15 years. You know, we're in 2025 now, and Sid and Ovi are still culturally relevant and good hockey players. You have the opportunity to bridge that gap from them to that McDavid, Matthews, Marner, Eichel window of guys who came in the mid 2010s, about 10 years after them, to that next wave, to the Jack Eichels, to not Jack Eichel, excuse me, to Jack Hughes, to Brock Faber, to Leo Carlson, you know, to that next window, that 10-year and then 5-year bridge, you know, that to window to Connor Bedard or to James Higgins or to Riley Leonard or to Gabriel Perreault. That'll be 4 or 5 years from now. It's important that you have these cultural touchstone moments where you have these symbolic passing of the torches. And it's great. I'm so happy Sid's healthy enough to play. I know how much Sid means to pretty much everybody on that team, on that Canadian team, other than Drew Doughty, who's his contemporary, and Marchand, contemporary in his age. But you talk to Matthew, you talk to you talk to the Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon. You talk to that era of guys. They all grew up wanting to be Sidney Crosby. And for the Americans, the Swedes, and the Finns who are going to play Canada, they get to go up against Sidney Crosby, representing the Maple Leaf. For guys like McKinnon and McDavid, they get to play on the same team as their childhood hero. Think about how cool that is. And an abstract, just you're telling people why they should care about this. Connor McDavid was a kid. He was like 4 or 5 years old, and he asked his parents to write a letter to Sidney Crosby to ask him how he deals with stress and how he deals with the pressure of needing to be successful. Mind you, Sidney Crosby was like 15 years old, playing junior hockey when Connor McDavid did this. Those guys get to be on the same team now. I will always, always be a sucker for when that happens, when you get those cool moments. You know, if you're an F1 fan, you think about the picture of George Russell with Lewis Hamilton from when George Russell was a kid and Lewis was just really starting out, and they got to be teammates. Like, say what you will about George Russell, the driver, the person, whatever, those types of narratives, that type of storytelling, that's always going to be cool to me. I will always be a sucker for the emotional ploy. Say what you will, man. It's awesome Connor's going to get to play with his hero. That matters. When the best player in the sport gets to get the torch from his favorite player, those types of moments matter. You know, Lemieux did it for Sid. You know, they were teammates on that Penguins team way back in the day, on that really bad Penguins team. That matters. You are seeing it happen in real time. We're going to take one more break on today's show, and we will actually talk about some of the hockey in the Four Nations face-off coming up right after this. So be sure to stick around. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shell variety. It's perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days, whether I'm at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost. They're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open a shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell option is a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out watching this Four Nations Face-Off preview edition of Locked On Oilers. And I love narratives when we're talking about sports because ultimately, at my core, I love storytelling. I find the human element of sports and the problem-solving component of sports to be what I find that keeps pulling me back. And this is a unique opportunity to do both. Of how can we get the NHL in front of more casual audiences? How can we build the most effective hockey roster possible? And we're watching a case study in that. Team Canada made a conscientious decision to bring grittier and more defensive-oriented players, people like Anthony Cirelli, Brandon Hagel, Travis Konechny, Travis Sanheim, Colton Parayko, over some of their more offensively inclined players like a Mark Scheifele and Evan Bouchard. You know, there are plenty of gifted hockey players sitting at home who probably wish they were getting an invite to play on these teams. And Team USA has made a bit more of an effort to implement younger skill-based players, although I probably would have liked to have seen Tage Thompson over Vincent Trocheck, Chris Kreider, or Brock Nelson over any of those three guys. I understand Team USA wanting to have some specialist guys, you know, Trocheck, a bit more of just face-offs, penalty killing. I get that, but at the same time, we have seen what happens in these best on best tournaments when teams bring too many specialists. Last time we did best on best hockey, Team USA scored like 3 goals in 3 games because they brought Justin Abdelkader and Brandon Dubinsky, who weren't offensive guys at all, and they got their doors blown off by significantly more skilled teams. But you are watching cultural changes in the sport happen in real time. You look at where the power structure of hockey is growing. You look at where hockey is succeeding, and you are seeing it in more non-traditional markets. You are seeing it tied to cultural status and economic status, where if you want to play goalie, well, your kid needs to have a lot of equipment. Your kids need specialty coaching. And the only people who can afford that are people of means, people of wealth. And you are seeing guys who have the opportunity to play in college, like a Jeremy Swayman, go to a public college like the University of Maine, which is, you know, not a bastion of wealth, but still something that most people would not be able to do out of pocket, someone that's going to need to take out a loan. But this isn't a conversation about that, even though I do think that's interesting. For me, on paper, Team Canada is by far the most accomplished. You go by games played, they have almost 600 more career playoff games than the next closest team, which is Sweden, 600 more than USA, and almost 700 more than Team Finland. And they have the most Stanley Cups of the teams in this tournament. They have the most Olympic gold medals of anyone in this tournament. Of course, Canada is the only team that's won a best on best Olympic gold medal in the last 15 years. You know, we've had subsequent tournaments in 2018 and 2022, but those weren't best on best. Those were hodgepodge groups of college guys, AHL guys, and people who weren't on teams at all. But Team Canada has 1,639 career playoff games combined, 20 total Stanley Cups, quite a few guys who have multiple, like Sidney Crosby, Drew Doughty, Braden Point, Anthony Cirelli, the gold medals from Doughty and Crosby. Team USA, I think, has more overall talent. I think when you have the options of Chuck Brothers, Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes, Jack Eichel, that's a really, really, really gifted group. And look, I think Canada's high-end guys are definitely the best. You know, we're talking about Sidney Crosby and excuse me, we're talking about Connor McDavid and Nathan MacKinnon, the two best players in the world on the same team. But I do think we're going to see a really good case study in the effectiveness of strategy and tactics and style versus pure talent. Because if you go guy by guy, especially in that forward group, I think you can make an argument Team USA's forward group is better. Now, Team USA's goaltending group on paper is the strongest of any team in this tournament. Team USA's defense was, I would say, the strongest, but with no Quinn Hughes, who's been the best defenseman in the world for the last 2 years because of injury, I think it's closer now. I think Canada's group is going to be a really interesting case study in how you play a team that's got more speed than you, because Team Canada on paper, I think obviously this would be a very good regular season and playoff hockey team. I think this group would fare very well in a playoff environment. And that's kind of the assumption here, that we're going to have playoff type intensity. There's not going to be a lot of space. It's going to be tight checking. It's going to be quick. It's going to be crisp. And I'll be very curious to see what the ramp up process is like for these games, because we're just kind of going for it. These guys have had less than a week of practices together. Some of these guys have never played together before. I do think the fact that a lot of Team USA has played together in the national development team program, which is usually guys 15, 16, and 17 before they go to college or get drafted. That DNA of, the Hughes brothers, the Kachuk brothers, Austin Matthews, those guys are all kind of interconnected and have a familiarity with each other. I do think that helps. A lot of these Canadian guys have played together. They've gone to world championships in the spring once their team's been eliminated, as part of this process to kind of get everyone acclimated and get back on this cycle. This is important that we maintain this as a sport, that these guys understand the importance of participating in international tournaments. And I don't think hockey guys are like basketball guys where if they win one medal, I think they're good. You really saw a concerted effort by LeBron, Steph Curry, and KD to encourage guys like Anthony Edwards and Devin Booker, young guys, that, hey, you want to participate in this. This is cool. This makes you cool. You want to do this. I don't think hockey's ever going to have that issue, but I do think it's important we maintain momentum, that NHL players get to go. If you ask me right now who wins this tournament, my default would probably be me saying Canada, because Canada always wins these tournaments. Sidney Crosby, when the chips are down, is the clutchest person I have ever seen in my life when it comes to professional hockey. I know he is not the player he used to be. He's probably going to end up playing more of a specialized defensive role. Last time we did a best on best tournament, he played with Bergeron and Mark Stone, and they just had a Clamps McGee line where you couldn't do anything against them defensively. I imagine they're going to do something similar with Mark Stone and Brad Marchand with Sid this time around as well. I'll be curious to see if we get to see Crosby, McKinnon, and McDavid play at any point together other than on the power play, which does seem like it's going to happen based on what we saw in practice the other day. But you should be excited about this as a hockey fan. This is infinitely better than an all-star game that none of the players care about. You should be excited. I cannot wait to watch. I will be tuned in. I will be in my hotel over the next few days, absolutely glued to the TV when I am not out watching this. I almost certainly am going to end up watching one of these games on my phone out and being antisocial. I cannot wait. You should be excited. We will have sporadic updates on this throughout the next week and a half or so as my availability allows. So I will talk to you guys soon. We do have a few more episodes for you this week. I am not leaving you in the content desert. I promise we'll have more typical Oilers stuff resuming tomorrow. But I did want to talk about this because I was genuinely so excited. I will talk to you guys soon. Until then, let's go Oilers.